The Evolution of a Bad Boy, written by Susanna Thompson, narrated by Sarah Sampino. Chapter 9. Celeste was relieved that Dylan came to pick her up in a car. She had overheard her parents arguing about him, and she didn't need to add the danger of a motorcycle to their list of reasons about why Dylan wasn't a suitable boyfriend for her. After Andrew, who appeared to be a perfect boyfriend for their daughter, Dylan was much too casual and hot. Her dad wanted to forbid her from seeing him. "You can't stop her from growing up," her mom said. "No," her dad agreed, "but I can slow it down as much as possible." "You'll just make him more attractive to her by trying to keep her from him. She'll sneak around and see him behind our backs. It's better to let it run its course," her mom advised. "She'll see for herself that he's not right for her." Celeste already knew that, but it didn't stop her from going out with him. She was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. He came into her house this time so that he could be properly introduced to her dad. Dylan was polite and said all the right things, but he looked too much like what he was, a boy who was out to seduce his daughter, for her dad to be able to trust him. He stood helplessly watching them as they left in Dylan's car. "Your dad doesn't like me," Dylan stated. "That's not true," Celeste lied. "It's okay. I'm used to it. No dad ever likes me. All that matters is that you like me, Celeste." He glanced over and smiled at her. "I haven't decided yet," she teased. "Then I'll have to convince you," he said, already beginning to flirt with her. To keep her thoughts from turning to how he might convince her, she returned to their conversation from last night. "So, who is this guy you said that Olivia likes? I asked her if she has a crush on anyone and she said no." "I'm not surprised she doesn't want to tell you," he replied. "I probably shouldn't have said anything about it." Celeste was really curious now. "Why? Who is it?" "Never mind. It's better to leave it alone." "No," she protested. "You can't leave me hanging like that. I won't be able to concentrate on the movie. Please tell me." "It's Andrew," Dylan said. "Andrew who?" Celeste asked. "Your ex-boyfriend, Andrew." He glanced over at her to see her reaction. Celeste laughed heartily. "That's ridiculous. Olivia would never do that." "She didn't do anything," he corrected her. "She just has a thing for him. I noticed it freshman year when I saw her looking at him. She would always look away when he looked in her direction. I didn't have any classes with them last year, but they're both in my science class this year. Nothing has changed. She's still into him, but he doesn't know it." "Freshman year? But that was before we even started going out. She never said anything to me about it," Celeste fretted. "Are you sure about this?" "Yeah, it's pretty obvious." Celeste was convinced that Dylan was wrong. She had never noticed any signs that Olivia had a crush on Andrew. They were all in student government and worked together organizing school events. Olivia was always focused on what needed to be done instead of using it as an excuse to socialize. Dylan thought that he was an expert on girls, but he was way off the mark on this one. Celeste decided that his absurd notion wasn't worth dwelling on and brought her thoughts back to the current situation as they arrived at the movie theater. Unlike most guys, Dylan chose to take her to a romantic movie instead of something full of explosions and car chases. They shared popcorn, but he didn't try to touch her during the movie. He simply allowed the story to set the mood. Celeste was very aware of him beside her during the kissing scenes. The actors had good chemistry, and the sexual tension between them sizzled. She was in a heightened state of anticipation as they walked out to the parking lot after the movie. Dylan pulled her into a kiss as they reached his car. Her lips were still tingling as she buckled her seatbelt. "I didn't know you had a car too," she said to break the tension. "Yeah, my dad bought it for me." He turned on the car and pulled out of the parking spot. "I bought the bike with my own money." "Do you have a job?" Celeste asked. "More than one," he said.
I work on a crew painting houses in the summer, and I work at a hardware store part-time, mostly stocking shelves.
She would have to tell her parents that so they could see that he was responsible. Painting houses? That sounds like hard work.
It is. My dad's friend owns the company. He wanted me to get out there and find out what it's like to make a living. My dad works in construction, and he's not too happy that I don't want to go to college.
You don't want to go to college? This was a foreign concept to Celeste. She thought everybody was planning on college.
I want to give music a shot first. If I don't make it, then I'll look into doing something else, he explained.
What does your mom think about that? Celeste knew that her parents would freak out if she decided not to go to college.
She believes in going after your dream, so she supports my decision. She was a model during her teens. It only lasted a few years and she never hit it big, but she says she's glad that she tried. Otherwise, she would have always wondered about it,
Dylan said. Your parents sound like opposite personalities, she remarked.
Yeah, they are. Maybe that's why they split up. It got to the point where they couldn't agree on anything. Dad lives in Arizona now, and they actually get along better now that they're not living together anymore. He's still trying to change my mind about college, though.
Celeste was glad that her parents were still together. So you live with your mom, she surmised.
Yeah, she's working right now. Mom works as a bartender on the weekends. That's why it's easier to practice at my house, because we're not bothering anybody. Alex even keeps his drum set there.
That explained why no parents had been around the previous evening, Celeste thought. You said she does that on the weekends. What does she do during the week?
She's a waitress. She makes good tips at her job, but we wouldn't be able to afford to live in our house if it hadn't already been paid off before my parents divorced, Dylan said. That's probably why your dad wants you to go to college. He wants you to be able to afford nice things. She realized that this sounded like a lecture, but she was used to speaking her mind. Dylan didn't seem to be offended. Yeah, he says he wants me to have it easier than he did. Construction is hard work, and he wants me to be in an air-conditioned office. I don't know about that, though. I think I'd be bored out of my mind. She couldn't picture him in an office either. Well, what else do you think you might want to do besides music? There's really nothing else that I want to do. I guess I'll find something else if I have to, he said doubtfully. Where are we going? Celeste hadn't been paying attention to her surroundings during their conversation, but she now noticed that they weren't in her neighborhood. To my house, he told her. Dylan, don't trust yourself to be alone with me. There was a challenging note in his voice. Yes, thought Celeste. It's not that. I think my parents want me home. I didn't hear them give you a curfew. I'm pretty sure your dad would have told me a specific time if you had a curfew. I don't have a curfew, she admitted. He pulled into his driveway but left the car running. I'll take you home, if that's what you want. I was hoping to spend a little more time with you, but I'm not going to force you to hang out with me. She knew it was a bad idea, but she didn't want to go home yet. I'll come in for a little while, but I can't stay long. Okay. He smiled at her and turned off the car. Celeste was beginning to feel extremely nervous as they entered the silent house. Dylan turned on the lights and offered her something to drink. He put on some music as she sat down on the couch and took a sip of her soda. Then he sat down beside her as she set her glass down on the coffee table. The conversation had flowed easily in the car, but now her mind seemed to have gone blank. Dylan gazed at her wordlessly before leaning in to kiss her. She responded by placing her hands on the back of his neck to pull him closer. The arousal she had felt while watching the movie with Dylan intensified as he deepened the kiss. The truth was that she had never completely calmed down after watching his sexy performance last night and having that hot encounter with him on her street afterwards. Now they were completely alone, and she didn't have to worry about anyone seeing them. Celeste forgot her caution as she kissed Dylan with growing passion. She was so into it that she didn't realize he had bypassed the usual progression of seduction
until she felt his hand inside her pants. "Dylan!" she gasped, but he had already slipped his hand inside her panties and found a spot she never knew existed. Celeste had never allowed anyone to touch her this way, but she couldn't seem to find the strength to stop him. She wasn't sure if she could have moved from this spot if the house had been on fire. Something powerful was building within her as Dylan stroked that special spot with his finger. She moaned with the pleasure of his touch, and then cried out as it culminated in a climax so intense that it made her whole body shudder.
"You came so fast,"
he said, his voice rough, low, and heated with desire. She was mortified as she pulled away from him. "I didn't mean to go that far." He watched her cover her face with her hands.
"Hey, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Didn't anybody ever get you off before?"
"No," she said from behind her hands, still hiding from him in shame.
"Wow."
He shook his head at the incompetence of her past lovers.
"Okay, listen to me, Celeste. You have no idea how hot that was for me. Celeste, please look at me."
She removed her hands from her face, but she refused to meet his gaze. "I want to go home."
"Okay, just give me a minute."
He stood up and took off for the bathroom. When he returned, she had composed herself somewhat, but she was still upset. He locked the door behind them as they left his house and walked to the car in silence. She was glad that he didn't try to talk to her on the way to her house, because she couldn't deal with that right now. He attempted to kiss her goodnight after he pulled into her driveway, but she turned her head away. "This has to stop," she said. "I can't see you anymore."
"Celeste,"
he protested, but she sprinted from the car before he could stop her. She took a breath to calm herself and hurried into the house to face her parents. Dylan was left with no choice but to go home. Celeste managed to make it through a brief chat with her parents before she claimed to be tired. She escaped to her room with her thoughts in a tumultuous mess.